LoveLore Library. Chapter 422 Entering the capital for a reward. 16. After settling down, Heartwarming looked at Zhou and asked, "Who is the girl you brought back?" Gu Qingrui didn't hide anything and roughly explained what had happened. Looking at her appearance, she should be the daughter of the Minister of Revenue, Yang Wanning, who is also my cousin. However, I'm not sure after not seeing her for a few years, so we'll have to wait until she wakes up to confirm if it's true. When Heartwarming heard him mention the Yang family, he hesitated and said, "Your aunt is gone." Gone. Gu Qingrui looked at him in astonishment. However, he soon felt relieved. He just smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. "You just arrived in the capital, so take your rest for now. 111 Tell you in detail after dinner." "Alright, let's talk later." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he stood up and sent him out. Coincidentally, the servants had also finished preparing hot water. The couple bathed and changed into clean clothes before heading to the dining room. Heartwarming was already waiting outside. When he saw them come out, he immediately ordered the dishes to be served. "After traveling for so long, do you want some wine to relieve your fatigue?" "Just some." Gu Qingrui thought of the Yang family's matter they had to discuss and agreed to his suggestion. Heartwarming saw this and asked someone to bring a small jar of white wine and fruit wine. The food was quite sumptuous. There was a large plate of beef ribs, a braised carp, a plate of stir-fried cabbage, a plate of sweet and sour shredded radish, and a plate of steamed buns served with egg soup. Heartwarming asked someone to pour the wine as soon as the dishes were served. "The year hasn't been kind to us, so there's a limit to what we can get. Please don't mind the food." "That's not true. It already looks great. Let's have a toast." Gu Qingrui shook his head at his words. "Sister, let's drink together. It's been a long time since the three of us drank together." Heartwarming said to Zhou. "Sure, one toast to Brother Zhou's happiness." Zhou raised her glass after hearing that. Alright, let's do it." Heartwarming raised his glass as well. After a glass of wine, he knew they were hungry, so he didn't persuade them to drink more. Instead, he picked up a piece of beef rib and said, "Try the cooking skills of the chefs in this manner." Zhou took a bite and said, "To be honest, it's quite good, but just that it's a little salty for my taste." Heartwarming nodded. "That's true. I'll mention it to them later. I will get them to put less salt in your food. There's no need for that. We won't be staying for long anyway. Even if it's just a meal, let's have it served the best it can be. Don't worry, it's not that troublesome." After Heartwarming finished speaking, he served them some food. After dinner, Gu Qingrui asked, "Brother Zhou, do you know how my aunt died? When did this happen?" "It is said that she died of illness during the snowstorm. Later, one sent people to investigate and discovered that your aunt fell ill after the Gu family was raided. She didn't make it during the snowstorm because the weather was too cold, and there was a lack of doctors and medicine." Gu Qingrui was so angry that he laughed after hearing that. The wife of a dignified second-grade official lacked medicine. What kind of precious medicinal herbs would that have to be? Heartwarming heard his sarcastic laughter and knew he didn't believe this. At that time, he did not believe it either. However, the capital was trapped during the snowstorm, and everyone knew this. Therefore, it was difficult to determine whether this tragedy was man-made or caused by a lack of medicine. He didn't hide anything and told him what he had found. Gu Qingrui couldn't judge the truth after hearing Heartwarming's findings. However, he was sure that his aunt had been bullied. "My mother didn't die from a lack of medicine. She froze to death." Yang Wanning walked in with an old woman's help and spoke up. Chapter 423 Entering the capital for a reward. 17. Gu Qingrui was stunned momentarily, as he didn't expect Yang Wanning to wake up this quickly. He quickly asked, "Is there anywhere you are feeling uncomfortable?" "Apart from the dizziness, I'm fine." Yang Wanning bowed and said, "Thank you, cousin, for saving me. It's nothing much. Come, have a seat. The dizziness is because you got hit by a rock. You'll be fine after resting for 2 days." Gu Qingrui explained. The old woman immediately helped Yang Wanning sit on a stool at the side. "Miss Yang has an injury on her head. Get the kitchen to prepare something light," Shou Huaiming said to the old woman. "Yes." The old woman responded and turned to leave. Gu Qingrui then asked, "Cousin, you just said that auntie froze to death. What's with that?" Yang Wanning lowered her head and clenched her fists. "After the incident with the Gu family, my mother did get anxious and fell ill once. It was also from then on that her status in the family lowered. However, she only fell ill because of the cold. In the winter of the year before last, it was especially cold after a snowfall. There wasn't enough charcoal going around, so the charcoal for the 3 of us was cut off. In less than 2 days, my mother, at the same time, Shou Ying, who had been observing her with her spiritual senses, found a bone-deep hatred and killing intent in Yang Wanning's eyes, which made her scalp tingle. It seemed that this cousin-in-law of hers wasn't that simple a person. Who was in charge of the Yang family at that time? Gu Qingrui asked after a moment of silence. "My grandmother, Madame Chui, and her niece, Mrs. Chui. Mrs. Chui is the concubine who gave birth to the eldest son. Yes, she's the main wife now. What do you plan to do next?" Gu Qingrui nodded and asked. Although they were technically related to the Yang family as in-laws, they were of the younger generation. In addition, the Gu family was still guilty of their crimes, so they couldn't interfere in the Yang family's affairs. Besides, he didn't want to care too much about this. Therefore, whether or not they live a good life depends on the siblings' intentions. If the siblings wanted to resist, Gu Qingrui didn't mind helping them. Otherwise, he did not need to stir up trouble for them. "Do you have my mother's dowry list?" Yang Wanning raised her head and asked. Gu Qingrui paused for a moment and shook his head. "No, but there shouldn't be any at home. Otherwise, your grandmother and the others wouldn't have not mentioned it." "I understand." Yang Wanning nodded in disappointment. After a while, the old woman came in with a bowl of chicken soup noodles and handed it to Yang Wanning, saying, "Miss Yang, please." "Thank you, Granny Ma." Yang Wanning turned her head and thanked her. "You guys can chat first. If the 3 of you need anything, feel free to mention it to Granny Ma. We'll have roast meat for dinner tonight." Shou Huaiming stood up and said. "Okay, we just happened to bring some seasoning with us. You just need to prepare the meat, oven, and skewers." Gu Qingrui sent him off after that. Granny Ma saw this and immediately cleared the bowls and chopsticks off the table before leaving. Only then did Yang Wanning pick up her chopsticks and eat her noodles. She looked at Shou Ying, who was drinking tea, and said, "You must be my 3rd cousin's wife. Thank you for taking care of me all the way here. You're too polite." Shou Ying shook her head and asked, "What's the matter today that you must travel into the wilderness?" "The Mother Goddess temple is on the mountain over there. I followed my grandmother to the mountain yesterday to offer incense. This morning, my 2nd sister suggested I go hunting in the mountains. It was just unexpected that this would be a trap. She wants you to marry that scholar." Yes, half a month ago, the emperor issued an imperial decree for selecting consorts for the 3rd, 4th, and 7th princes. The eldest daughter of a 2nd-grade official or above is required to participate, and am the eldest daughter of the Yang family, so I was afraid of being ambushed, so one set up camp near the canyon one night. At night, a low flute whistled as two venomous snakes crawled into my tent. If Gu Qingrui hadn't woken up to drink a glass of water that night, we would have been bitten and died to those snakes. Venomous snakes. The emperor was furious after hearing this. If he remembered correctly, only a few people in the southwest knew such snake-taming techniques. Southwest. Could it be his eldest son? But what if? Do you know who did it? He asked. I'm not sure. I didn't catch anyone. The third prince shook his head. The emperor nodded after hearing this. You're not young anymore. I'll arrange a small consort selection banquet in 3 days. You and your brothers can decide on your main consorts then. At the same time, you and your uncle will be rewarded according to your achievements. Thank you, father. One will heed your arrangements. Oh, right. Will the Gu husband and wife come together? The third prince asked. How's the situation with the Gu family now? The emperor asked. The third prince knew the emperor had people in Yunhe County, so he did not hide anything. He also added in and told him about the general situation of the Gu family. I didn't expect them to be this capable. Also, one heard that the Gu family's third son and his wife have a manor and restaurant under them, right? The emperor asked. Chapter 425 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 18, Yes, do you still remember the larceny of military rations 3 years ago? The third prince asked. Of course, I remember. Your eldest brother's men did it. If you hadn't found out in time, your Dongyang navy would have starved that winter. At that time, Zhou Huaiming was the one who escorted the rations. He was on guard but never expected a traitor from the inside. He almost lost his life at that time. It was Gu Qingrui who discovered and saved him. Otherwise, the grass on his grave would have been overgrown by now. A scholar like him sure has the guts, huh? At the time, he was also backed into a corner due to unforeseen circumstances. A wealthy family from the Qiao clan nearby was also among those robbing the grain. Their family had grudges against the Gu family, so they had been suppressing the Gu family after they returned to the point where they did not even have the chance to go out and work. Later, the elder of the Qiao family fixed his gaze on his wife and the stewed recipe they devised. He was powerless to resist and could only think of ways to find the Qiao family's weakness, so he constantly kept tabs on the Qiao family. When he learned they had taken action that night, he followed them. On his way home, he met Zhou Huaiming, who was near death. He also learned some medical skills, which is why Zhou Huaiming lived to tell the tale. Zhou Huaiming would not have been able to hide from a large-scale search otherwise. Thus, Zhou Huaiming later bought a manor and a restaurant with his own money and gave them to them. The couple didn't take it for granted either. They gave Hongyun restaurant the recipe for braised pork, which we greatly appreciated. I didn't expect this kid to have some guts. Oh, right, how are his medical skills? The emperor nodded and asked. I heard he learned a little from the academy's doctor and was able to treat some minor illnesses at first. He later learned a lot from a local doctor. From the looks of it, he can treat all common illnesses as long as they aren't rare diseases. The emperor nodded and then looked at the third prince. Ever since the incident with the Zhou family, his son had stopped smiling and become pitifully quiet. He didn't expect the third prince to be this talkative today. It was obvious that he had a good impression of Gu Qingrui. How do you think we should reward the Gu family this time? The emperor asked. I'm also sure you're aware that they invented the water wheel. My eldest and fourth brothers were the only ones who raised a fuss and demanded that we give credit to the Qian family instead. They had also given their full support to promote the white sweet potatoes. Especially since they were the ones who discovered the technique to cultivate white sweet potatoes, one feel they should be exempted from their crimes. As for the reward, that is secondary. Does that mean the white sweet potatoes were already ready when we knew of them? They began planting the sweet potatoes the year before one sent you the sweet potatoes, the second year after they returned to the countryside. However, because seeds were scarce then, they only began planting them in large numbers in the village a year later. After that, the father and son chatted for a while about court matters before the third prince took his leave. On the other hand, Madame Chui asked for Yang Wanning after she returned home and questioned her, "Where did you go? The people I sent to look for you disappeared at the foot of the hill. Did you do something shameful?" Yang Wanning clenched her fists after hearing that. She looked up and replied with a firm expression, "Grandmother, this concerns the reputation of the four of us. Don't listen to those slanderous words. We must put an end to it as soon as possible. If word gets out, we will not only be unable to participate in the selection of the imperial consort, but we will also offend the third prince." "What does it have to do with the third prince?" "Because the third prince saved me after I fell down." Chapter 426 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 19, What? The third prince saved you? Madame Chui exclaimed. After that, she looked at her with a complicated gaze. The expression on her face also changed, just like in an opera performance. It was interesting, to say the least. Yang Wanning was overjoyed when she saw this. "You didn't expect it, did you? After all the scheming, you actually helped me out. You must be vomiting internally." Yang Wanning thought to herself. However, she could not understand why she did not expect to meet the third prince in her previous life. There was no such thing as promoting sweet potatoes, and the Gu family went radio silent after returning to the countryside. Could something have happened? Or was it because of her regression? She didn't have a clue, and this wasn't the time to think about it. She continued, "Yes, but to be precise, I was saved by my third cousin and his wife, who followed the third prince to the capital." Third cousin. Madame Chui was stunned for a moment. But the Chui family had yet to come to the capital recently. She thought of something and asked in disbelief, "The Gu family, aren't they guilty? How can they be by the third prince's side?" Yang Wanning replied with some fake surprise, "I'm not sure about the details. It could be because third cousin's medical skills are not bad, as he was the one who bandaged my head." She was familiar with the Yang family's personality. They exemplified bullying the weak and fearing the strong. They would only make a move once they understood the depth of the Gu family. Madame Chui would not make things difficult for her and her brother before more information was gathered. This would give Yang Wanning time to assess the situation and figure out what had happened in her previous life before launching a counterattack. Of course, it would be preferable if the Gu family could recover or have their crimes pardoned if they couldn't. This way, her participation in the consort election would be unaffected. Madame Chui did not ask any more questions after hearing this. Instead, she waved her hand and told her to return to her room. In the afternoon, Zhou Huiming brought the mutton and barbecue tools over, and they called for 3 servants to skewer the meat. After the skewers were done, Zhou Huiming went to call the third prince over. There was also a young man in his 30s who wore luxurious clothes and had a firm expression. After Zhou Huiming returned, he introduced them to each other. Only then did Zhou Ying and her husband learn that this was the butler's eldest son and the third prince's godbrother, Feng Chen. He currently manages all of the third prince's private property. "Dr. Gu, Lady Gu, if you need anything from me, just let me know." Feng Chen stepped forward and greeted them. "Of course. If you need my help, don't hesitate as well." Gu Qingrui returned the greeting. "All right, now that we know each other, let's quickly sit down and start the barbecue," Zhou Huiming said. After saying that, he walked straight to the grill and grabbed the skewers to barbecue them. When Gu Qingrui saw this, he helped smash some charcoal for preparation. After a while, Zhou handed many cooked skewers to Zhou Huaiming and said, "Brother Zhou, you guys eat first." 111 Cook. Alright, well, take your place later. After Zhou Huaiming finished speaking, he took the skewer into the dining room and placed it on the table. Hurry up and eat while it's hot. It won't taste good if it gets cold. After saying that, he took a skewer and started eating. It's still the same. Fragrant, fresh, and tender. It's amazing. As for the third prince and Feng Chen, they shook their heads when they saw his gluttonous appearance. However, they soon succumbed to the temptation and could not stop eating. Gu Qingrui helped to light some charcoal. After the second batch of skewers was ready, he carried it into the house. Seeing this, Zhou felt they had enough to eat for a while, so she roasted the lamb leg. At the same time, she called over 3 women to help them roast more. Once the lamb leg was ready, the 4 men in the dining room were almost full. Zhou and the 3 women cooked while they ate. At the same time, she started chatting with them. Chapter 427 Entering the capital for a reward, 20. What she didn't expect was that the third prince wasn't married. He was sure an anomaly in the royal family. At the same time, she also learned that butler Feng currently handled the third prince's residence. Inside a fake mountain outside the kitchen, Qiao Lanlan looked at the person in front of her with a face full of surprise and joy. "They're here. Can I make a move now?" On the opposite end was a man dressed like a servant. He looked around vigilantly and said, "No, Master said you can't be exposed yet. He also wants me to remind you that Gu Qingrui has no feelings for you. If you spoil his plans, he won't forgive you." "I know. I've gave up on him a long time ago." Qiao Lanlan nodded and asked, "So, what instructions does Master have?" "No, for the moment. Your mission is to use all kinds of soups to sterilize the third prince's wife. Don't worry about anything else. Remember, don't act on your own. Otherwise, if you're recognized, no one can save you." "I understand." Although Qiao Lanlan was unwilling, she still nodded. The servant looked at her reluctant expression and pinched her chin. "Remember what I said. Someone will deal with Gu Qingrui and his wife, but it can't be you." "Understood." Qiao Lanlan nodded. The servant saw that she had listened to him and quietly left. Qiao Lanlan, on the other hand, was so pissed that she raised her leg and kicked the fake mountain walls. She grimaced in pain. However, this also reminded her. She still decided to give Zhou a sterilization drug and couldn't wait to see how long Gu Qingrui could still be in love with her. She had to find the right time or be in big trouble. Zhou and Gu Qingrui finally entered the inner space together again at night. After Gu Qingrui went to work, Zhou started dealing with the demands of her believers, especially those requesting to cure their diseases by giving them medicine. Finally, she checked on Yang Wanning. Soon, she found something was amiss. She noticed Yang Wanning was plagued by bad luck, and although hatred was in her eyes, it was not strong. Her eyes looked relatively clean and pure of revenge. This was different from when she saw her during the day. The hatred and killing intent in her eyes were as sharp as a sword. Zhou also noticed a deep sadness and longing in her eyes occasionally. Was she hiding it well before, or? Thinking of this, she followed the faith and found Yang Wanning sitting in a daze in her room. There was a picture on the table in front of her, and drawn on it were some of the people around her. Zhou Ying's gaze stopped on the scholar because there was a label on him. Husband. In other words, they would get married. Thinking back to her cold attitude towards the scholar during the day and her words about how the scholar was still valuable, she suddenly had a thought. Was Yang Wanning a regressor? If that were the case, this would be interesting. This meant they could quickly confirm whether the third prince was the next emperor through Yan Wanning. It would be fine if it were, but she would have to consider her next moves seriously if it weren't. After leaving her side, Zhou Ying went to Madame Cui. Madame Cui asked a handsome and scholarly young man, "Son, you have to investigate what's going on with the Gu family. Why would they enter the capital? If the Gu family finds out the cause of their aunt's death, we'll be in big trouble. I'll investigate this. As for the cause of Mrs. Gus's death, you don't have to worry. I've already dealt with it, and they won't find anything. Are you sure there's no trail left behind?" "Yes, other than Jinhua, no one else knows. I don't think she's stupid enough to tell anyone." Chapter 428 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 21, Good. Find out why the third son of the Gu family is here as soon as possible. Got it. Mother, you go to bed early, I still have official documents to deal with. Through their conversation, Zhou Ying quickly confirmed that this man was the Minister of Revenue, Yang Shiqing. She thought to herself that this man sure took good care of himself. She would have thought he was only in his 30s if she didn't know that he was almost 40. She thought of the dowry list that Yang Wanning had mentioned before. She immediately searched Madame Cui's house. Sure enough, a dowry list was on the wall in a small secret compartment. She hesitated momentarily, tried to see if she could take it out, and was surprised to see she had succeeded. She opened the booklet in her hand and read it. She got envious after reading it. On it were 5 shops, 2 villages, and a residence. There was also jewelry, cloth, calligraphy, antiques, ornaments, porcelain, and more. Zhou Ying closed it and muttered, "No wonder ancient weddings were said to have 10 miles of red dresses. It's sure scary. No wonder the Gu family was targeted. Their raid probably filled up more than half of the national treasury." After looking at it, she took it and returned to the villa. She made a copy of it before putting it back in the safe. Zhou Ying then turned around and went to work. Later, she handed the photocopied list to Gu Qingrui and said, "Take a look at this. This is the dowry list of your aunt. One just don't know how we should deal with this. What a ridiculous list of dowries. It's a pity that even this many things haven't fed them enough." Gu Qingrui sighed. He added, "The handwriting on this is second uncle's. I'll write a letter back later. If there's a copy on their end, I'll ask them to send it over. Otherwise, well, just create one and fake it. Alright, send a letter to Uncle Lu as well so that this isn't leaked." "I will. I hope this can help the siblings." "Right, I suspect that Yang Wanning is a regressor." Zhou Ying told him what she found today. "Regressor? You mean she returned here from the future?" "Yes, I heard from her that the emperor plans to choose concubines for the few princes. It might be because of this that someone is plotting against her. Her stepmother, that's right. Yang Wanning is the eldest daughter of the Yang family. It looks like we've caught up in something fun. There's going to be a good show." "Yeah, but we must be careful if we get dragged in. In addition, be more careful from now on. I feel that Lord Yang will investigate us and the Gu family. Don't worry, he won't be able to make it in time." The third prince said that the concubine selection banquet will be held in the afternoon 3 days from now. It will also be the rewarding ceremony. Gu Qingrui paused and continued, "Oh right, the third emperor said that someone would come tomorrow morning to tailor our clothes. So, he told us not to head out tomorrow morning." "Alright." Zhou Ying nodded. To avoid causing trouble for the third prince, they stayed in residence for the next 2 days. They sightsee the vast residence, and Zhou Ying started learning palace etiquette from the old women. The Yang family, on the other hand, was not as peaceful. Madame Cui and her nephew, including Yang Wanyu, the Yang family's second daughter, had devised a plan with the guards to prevent Yang Wanning from participating in the selection. Yang Wanning, who had planned it, had avoided their sly schemes. Instead, she replaced Qing Tao, one of Mrs. Cui's maidservants, as the one who fell victim to the trap. In the end, with the scholar in her hands as a hostage, Lord Yang finally allowed her to participate in the consort selection. However, he had not prepared any appropriate clothing or jewelry for her. She also had no money, so she had no choice but to ask the couple for assistance. Chapter 429 Palace Banquet 1. Zhou Huaiming, who happened to be eating in the manor, heard Yang Wanning's request from her maidservant and said speechlessly, "Minister Yang is getting increasingly shameless. If it weren't for the support of the Gu family, he wouldn't be where he is today. Now, he's actively bullying his own child. How shameless." As he spoke, his anger grew. Because this made him think of the current emperor. Back then, it was also because of Zhou Huaiming's grandfather's support that the current emperor could ascend to the throne. However, as soon as his throne was secured, he began to settle accounts with the Zhou family and caused the death of his aunt. If not for the Empress Dowager's conscience and the fact that the northern borderline couldn't live without his father, their entire family, including the third prince, would have long become a pile of bones. After the third prince heard his anger, he only silently glanced at him and did not say anything. Gu Qingrui didn't overthink it after hearing that. Instead, he told Chun Shi, "Go back and tell your young miss that we will help her prepare clothes and jewelry, but when she goes out tomorrow, she should wear the clothes the Yang family prepared for her. Letting everyone know about the Yang family's discrimination would be best. When the banquet officially begins, we'll send the clothes for her to change into." "Thank you, young master. I will take my leave." Chun Shi responded and left. The third prince thought of Yang Wanning, who shared the same fate as her, and was afraid that this servant girl would have an accident on the way. He called a secret guard and said, "Send Chun Shi back in secret. Wait for her to safely return to Miss Yang's side before returning." "Aye." The secret guard responded and turned to leave. "Thank you, third prince," Gu Qingrui said. "It's nothing." The third prince shook his head. "I'll get the butler to arrange the clothes and jewelry. Don't worry about it." "All right, but we will pay for this," Gu Qingrui said. "Sure. When it's done, I'll get the butler to give you the bill." The third prince hesitated momentarily, but he finally nodded when he thought of his and Yang Wanning's reputations. After returning to the inner space at night, Gu Qingrui said, "Babe, when you're done with your work, see how Yang Wanning is doing. I hope she stays safe. You're really concerned about her." Zhou Ying looked at him in surprise. "If she's really a regressor, it means she is a person with a destiny or mission. We'll help her whenever we can, as we might need her help in the future." Gu Qingrui paused and continued, "But it depends on her ability. If she can't take on the responsibility, just keep her safe." Zhou Ying nodded. "All right. By the way, it's time to harvest the rice fields. Remember to come and help me with it after you're done." "Got it. I'll go over to my end first." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned around and went to the other side of the river. After Zhou Ying fulfilled all her believers' requests that she could, she went to look for Yang Wanning again. At that moment, Yang Wanning was memorizing a poem intently. Beside her was an exquisite purse she had made herself, and she got ready for dance practice after memorizing the poem. Only when it was almost midnight did she lie down on the bed and fall asleep. At this moment, Zhou Ying also realized that the new clothes under Yang Wanning's blanket were dark purple dresses. Be it the color or the style, it wasn't suitable for a young lady to wear. It seemed that Madame Cui and her nephew weren't smart. If young Wanning wore these clothes, wouldn't they also be putting themselves to shame? It was an unnecessary double-edged sword. When Zhou Ying turned to look at Madame Chue, she was already asleep. She didn't appear to be sleeping well and was constantly muttering. She seemed to have done a lot of bad things. Chapter 430 Palace Banquet 2. In the end, Mrs. Chue stopped at Yang Wanya's room and instructed her on some things that she should pay attention to tomorrow. What surprised Zhou Ying was that their target was not to be the third prince's main consort but the first prince's secondary consort. However, she realized this was to be expected when she remembered that Lord Yang had sided with the first prince. Just as Mrs. Chue was about to leave after giving her instructions, Yang Wanyu suddenly said, "Mother, are we really able to stop that little slut from participating in the consort selection tomorrow? Don't worry, the Empress is also unwilling to see her. Tomorrow, not only will one stop her from attending the banquet, but one will also be destroying her reputation." Really? That's great. With the Empress stepping in, her life is ruined. Who told her she doesn't know what's good for her? She clearly had the option of marrying into a proper and wealthy family, but she insisted on climbing the high branches and pretending to be a phoenix. We don't have any other choices than to show her what it means to be inferior to a chicken. Zhou Ying shook her head after hearing this. It was uncertain who would be unlucky tomorrow because she found that bad luck was rapidly shrouding both the mother and daughter. After she finished her work in her interspace, Zhou Ying told Gu Qingrui of the mother and daughter plotting against Yang Wanning. We must be careful tomorrow in case the Empress or the first prince's people find trouble with us. Yeah, and the Zhou family. They might not be nice to you as well. No. Since they sold my original self back then in exchange for some betrothal gift, it's equivalent to breaking off our blood relationship. If they come to me for something, I won't hesitate to humiliate them. Okay, be careful. Try not to come into contact with them. After lunch the next day, Zhou Ying reviewed the court etiquette under the supervision of the older women. After making sure that there were no mistakes, the couple followed the third prince and Zhou Huaiming to the palace. The two of them first followed them to Longevity Palace to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager learned that the couple was from the Gu family, she was momentarily surprised before asking with a smile, "Do take a seat. Is your grandmother well?" "Empress Dowager, my grandmother's health is doing well. She even told me to greet you properly, given a chance to meet you." Good. It's good that she's healthy." The Empress Dowager smiled. Then, her gaze fell on Zhou Ying, and she said, "You must be the little girl from the Zhou family. I see you are not only beautiful but also elegant in your craft. It's no wonder Ping Yang chose you back then at first glance. Thank you for your kindness, Empress Dowager." Zhou Ying stepped forward and bowed. You're quite the gallant girl." Not bad. The Empress Dowager laughed when she saw that Zhou Ying had no humble attitude toward her other than respect. To be honest, not to mention the imperial madams, even the Empress was careful when speaking before her. She hadn't expected that a daughter of a concubine who had not been favored since she was young would be so undaunted before her. She sized Zhou Ying up. Besides her outstanding looks, Empress Dowager also noticed Zhou Ying's excellent temperament. Although she didn't have the aura of a noble daughter, she gave off the feeling of a saint that could only be looked up to. However, Zhou Ying gave off a friendly and easygoing feeling instead of an overbearing holy aura. It was a conflicted feeling, but the Empress Dowager had to admit Zhou Ying was an outstanding person. "Quickly, come to my side. Let me take a good look at you." Although Zhou Ying was a little reluctant, she responded and slowly walked over. However, she didn't go directly up to her. Instead, she stood a meter shy of her. Seeing this, the Empress Dowager patted the seat at the side and smiled. "Come, sit down, and chat with me." She wanted to see if this little girl was really not afraid of her or if she was just acting. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. Calm. Chapter 431 Palace Banquet 3. I'm afraid that's inappropriate of me. As a commoner, I cannot sit on this seat. Zhou shook her head and smiled. The third prince couldn't figure out what the Empress Dowager was thinking, so he stood up and said, Imperial Grandmother, don't scare her. I'm still counting on her to cook a few delicious meals for me. Oh, that means her cooking isn't bad? The Empress Dowager asked in surprise. At the same time, seeing her neither servile nor overbearing attitude, she knew that Zhou was not afraid of her. It was just that it was not easy to press on further due to her imperial status. After that, she asked her personal maid, Nanny Lu, to bring a stool for Zhou to sit on her right. Yes, her cooking is quite to my taste, the third prince replied. Really? What's your specialty? The Empress Dowager turned to look at Zhou. Egg fried rice, Zhou replied after a moment of surprise. Egg fried rice, it's a very simple dish. Yes, but it tests one's skills the most. In addition to not sticking to the pot, the rice also needs to be separately dipped in the egg, so that the egg and rice fragrance blend and permeate each other until they fuse into one. This is so that there is egg in the rice and rice in the egg. When the Empress Dowager heard her description, she immediately imagined what her egg fried rice looked like. She couldn't help but nod and say, now that you say it, I'm indeed craving a plate. When you have time, cook some for me to try. At your command. Zhou nodded. After that, the Empress Dowager asked the third prince a few more questions, especially about his daily life. Finally, she asked, do you have a girl you like? If you do, you must tell your grandmother. Otherwise, it will be too late once the marriage is decided tonight. No, I don't have anyone. The third prince shook his head. All these years, he had been staying in Dongyang. For safety reasons, he rarely left his residence, which meant he had no chance to interact with girls. How could he find a girl he liked this way? So, what kind of person are you looking for? You must have a rough idea, right? There are two main points. One is to be strong-willed, and the other is to be upright. I'm rarely in the capital. So, as long as she can support the family and teach our child well, that would be great. The Empress Dowager nodded in agreement. You're right. If a woman doesn't have a good heart and a strong will, she can't be the daughter-in-law of the royal family. Even if she became one, it wouldn't be a stable relationship. This was an essential trait of the royal family, especially true being an empress. Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager sighed as she remembered a girl from the Zhou family. Just then, someone led a group of elderly imperial madams in and bowed to the Empress Dowager and the third prince. Imperial Grandmother, elders, please continue your talks. We'll take our leave now. The third prince stood up. Greetings, Empress Dowager. I will take my leave. Zhou followed suit and bowed. Grandson, you guys can go. As for Zhou, do stay, and they'll bring you over later, the Empress Dowager said to the three of them. After that, she asked Zhou to sit back down. I'll leave it to Imperial Grandmother. The third prince hesitated for a moment before nodding. He turned around and left Longevity Palace with Gu Qingrui and Zhou Huaiming. After they left, a hunchbacked old woman in her 60s looked at the Empress Dowager and asked, Empress Dowager, could this be the girl that the third prince has taken a fancy to? For that, you're wrong. She's the girl who was wed into the Gu family to wash off Ping Yang's bad luck. I like this child's temperament. The Empress Dowager shook her head and introduced Zhou. She's King An's consort. She got along quite well with your grandmother a few years ago. This commoner, Zhou greets consortin. Zhou stood up and bowed. Do raise your head. How's your grandmother now? She's quite healthy. When she's busy, she does some farm work. When she's free, she goes outside to bask in the sun and chat with the other older women in the village. Follow current novels on Top Novel.com. Chapter 432 Palace Banquet 4. That's great to hear. Let's have a good chat at the residence in 2 days. King An's consort smiled and nodded. At the same time, she also knew why the Empress Dowager liked her. The way Zhou carried herself and her style of speech were not inferior to those of those noble ladies. The key was that those noble ladies were with the Empress Dowager. They always had ulterior motives. Zhou was different. She had no agenda or purpose, so this was why they could relax and have a real chat. Are you really Zhou? At this moment, an old woman with white hair and a walking stick asked Zhou in surprise. She did not expect the timid girl, who looked ordinary and submissive before, to become such an outstanding woman. She would have nurtured her properly if she had known earlier. Even if Zhou couldn't marry into a wealthy family and become the main wife, she could still be a concubine to help her children and grandchildren. Zhou turned her head to look. When she saw the old woman's appearance, she paused momentarily. Soon, fragments of memories flashed through her mind. However, they were all images of this elderly woman despising or ignoring the original Zhou. Even when the old woman saw Zhou brothers and sisters bullying her, she never stood up and said a word. At the same time, Zhou also knew that this old lady was her grandmother, the madam of the Zhou family. Thus, she deliberately asked, Don't you recognize me? Madame Zhou's face darkened immediately. At the same time, the others looked over at them. It turned out that this pair of biological grandparents and grandchildren could not recognize each other after just a few years. Of course, most of them also knew Zhou was not favored by the Zhou family back then. She had grown up with servants, so it was not strange that she had no feelings for them. Zhou deliberately sized her up before bowing. Zhou greets Madame Zhou. Madame Zhou opened her mouth and was about to flare up, but she quickly remembered that she had not acknowledged this granddaughter of her back then and had asked her to call her Madame along with the servants. Thus, she shut her mouth. However, she still snorted coldly and ignored her after that. When everyone heard how Zhou addressed Madame Zhou, they looked at them in surprise. However, they were all smart. They knew there must be something between them, so they did not ask further. The Empress Dowager introduced the people in the hall individually to Zhou. When she was introduced to the Marquis of Dingan's wife, Zhou was stunned momentarily before she bowed without batting an eyelid. Because it was this old woman who had been burdened with shrouds of blood debts while praying to Mother Goddess. Zhou had not expected her to be the mother of the current empress. No wonder the empress and the first prince were great at murder. It seemed like they had an excellent upbringing. After greeting them, Zhou obediently retreated aside and listened to their conversation. Soon, she discovered that other than the 3 elderly consorts of the royal family, everyone else was here to praise and speak well of their granddaughters. In short, they were here to recommend their children to the Empress Dowager. Even Madame Zhou had tried her best to compliment her granddaughter, Zhou Jiaqing, Principal Zhou's youngest daughter. However, from the original Zhou memories, she knew Zhou Jiaqing was not a good person by any means. In front of the elders, she was a sweet and obedient girl who everyone loved. However, the original Zhou had seen her harming and torturing small animals more than once. She would even beat and scold the servants whenever she was unhappy. It would be a blessing if Zhou Jiaqing could avoid causing trouble after marrying into the royal family, much less basking in any glory. Then there was Madame Cui, who praised Yang Wanyu as much as possible and never once mentioned Yang Wanning. However, Shou-ing did not open her mouth to remind her about Yang Wanning. The more they ignored Yang Wanning, the more they would be disgusted by the Yang family when Yang Wanning appeared. Follow current novels on Top Novel Fool. Calm. Chapter 433 Palace Banquet 5. Soon, more and more people came to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager, many of whom were from the younger generations. Many came over to greet the Empress Dowager and chatted for a while before leaving. The ones who stayed behind were the elderly women and the others who had come to curry favor with the Empress Dowager. These were the women who wanted to marry their daughters to the third prince. Seeing this, Shou-ing sat at the side and drank her tea. She would only speak when someone asked about her. However, because of her low status, no one paid attention to her except the Empress Dowager. Shou-ing was feeling carefree. Since she was free, she spread out her spiritual senses to look at what was inside the imperial palace. Although it was already winter, many flowers bloomed, making the palace lively. Of course, other than the remote courtyard that looked eerie and creepy. Finally, her gaze stopped on Yang Wanning. Shou-ing saw her sitting quietly in the pavilion at the side. She held a cup with both hands and looked into the distance in a daze, with no one knowing what she was thinking. Hey, aren't you Yang Wanning? Why are you sitting here alone in a daze? At this moment, a petite girl of about 15 or 16 years old walked over and asked. Yang Wanning turned her head and saw the person who had approached her. She immediately stood up and bowed. Greetings to the 8th princess. There's no need to be so polite. Take a seat. The 8th princess sat down after she finished speaking. She sized Yang Wanning up and said with disdain, "Tisk tsk, your clothes are too old-fashioned. This doesn't seem like your style. It's good enough that it isn't disrespectful." Yang Wanning smiled. At the same time, Yang Wanning became vigilant because the 8th princess was the Empress' daughter. She was the Gu family's sworn enemy and would definitely not have good intentions towards her. Of course, she did not have a good impression of the 8th princess. Isn't she rude? Don't forget what occasion we're in today. At this moment, Yang Wanyu walked over with a group of sisters. Everyone looked at her clothes and immediately started to criticize her. When the 8th princess saw this, she disdainfully added, "One can't believe you have the nerve to participate in the selection of the main consort with this dress. One believe you should go home as soon as possible, lest you make a fool of yourself. Indeed, by doing this, you're indicating that you don't take this banquet seriously." Someone immediately echoed. "Come on, everyone. Her mother died less than a year ago. It's not suitable for her to wear bright-colored clothes. Besides, the one in charge of the Yang residence was a concubine. Do you think she will prepare suitable clothes for her?" At this moment, a 17 or 18-year-old girl in riding attire looked at everyone with disdain. When the girls heard this, they were stunned momentarily and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Princess Mingyu. Rise." Mingyu waved the whip in her hand and then looked at Yang Wanyu disdainfully. All the women reacted at this moment and turned to look at Yang Wanyu in unison. The current head of the Yang family is her biological mother, so her mother must have prepared that dress. Looking at Yang Wanyu, she was clad in exquisite clothing from top to bottom. They were several grades higher than any clothing she had ever worn. Compared to Yang Wanning, Mingyu looked at everyone's reaction and sneered, "You all are not stupid." However, a concubine's child will always be a concubine's child. She will never consider the bigger picture. Yang Wanning is your eldest sister. If she loses dignity, you won't be gaining any, either. Besides, her dress was prepared by your mother, right? If you laugh at her, aren't you laughing at yourself? Spending her mother's dowry and laughing at her pitifulness, what thick skin you have. Follow current novels on Top Novel Fool. Calm. Chapter 434 Palace Banquet 6. After Princess Mingyu said that, she sat at the table and looked at the 8th princess. Besides your identity as the first wife's daughter, you're also a princess. In the future, don't hang out with these unpresentable people. It's unbefitting of your status. The 8th princess' lips twitched. Thank you for your teachings, Aunt Mingyu. At the same time, she loathed Princess Mingyu so much that her teeth itched. Not only did this woman snatch the love that her imperial father and imperial grandmother should have given her, but how dare she lecture her shamelessly. The 8th princess gritted her teeth in anger. She also looked down on Yang Wanya's status. What did she mean by that? The 8th princess' mother was also a consort. Was she saying that the 8th princess and her brother's status was lower than the 3rd prince's? At the thought of this, the 8th princess wanted to raise her hand and hit Princess Mingyu. However, she forcefully suppressed her anger when she saw the whip in her hand. On the other end, Yang Wanyu looked at everyone with eyes about to cry. She was here to belittle Yang Wanning, so how did it turn around in the blink of an eye, and all of it was directed at her? She quickly stuttered, No, what? Are you saying your mother didn't prepare her clothes, or did your family's expenses not come from the Gu family's dowry? Yang Wanyu stammered for a moment before turning around and running away. That's it. Such an uneducated girl, running away without even excusing yourself. Mingyu spoke again. The girls lowered their heads and tried to hold back their laughter. Princess Mingyu was as daring as the legend said. If Lord Yang heard this, he would be furious. While Yang Wanning was grateful to her, she was also worried for her. In her previous life, Princess Mingyu had offended the Empress faction in her previous life because of her straightforwardness. In the end, the residence of King An was buried with her for her insolence. When the 8th princess saw that Mingyu was sitting steadily, she knew that she no longer had the chance to bully Yang Wanning. She stood up, bowed, and left. After this, the girls followed her out one after another. After everyone left, Mingyu downed a glass of water and turned to look at Yang Wanning. Why aren't you leaving yet? Why should one leave? Yang Wanning smiled and asked. Mingyu looked at her kind smile and was stunned for a moment. Aren't you afraid of offending them? You saw their attitude toward me. It's useless for me to curry favor with them. As Yang Wanning said this, she poured Princess Mingyu another glass of water. I still have to thank Princess Mingyu for standing up for me just now. I just can't stand what they're doing, especially Yang Wanyu. Such shamelessness. Mingyu resentfully spat. You too. You're too soft-hearted. If it were me, I would have slapped her till tomorrow. Just like you said, the Yang residence is now under Madame Cuis and her daughter's control, so anyone wise will understand what is going on. The fiercer they make a fuss and the ruder they become, the worse people's impression of them will be in the end, right? Yang Wanning replied. When Chun Hong returned her cousin's message, she initially did not know what to make of it. Only when she read the message's end did she understand her cousin's intention. Since Madame Cui wanted to ruin her reputation, then let her be. When people realized what was happening, they would return the ridicule and sarcasm to the mother and daughter. At that time, she would wear the clothes that her cousin had prepared for her. She would not lose face in front of the royal family and would also give the mother and daughter a fierce slap in the face. Just thinking about it made her feel happy. Mingyu was amused when she heard that. She patted her shoulder and said, The two of us are really at opposite extremes. I'm straightforward by nature, and you do things roundaboutly. It would be great if we could share some of our personalities with each other. It would save my mother from scolding me for being stupid every day. Follow current novels on Top Novel Fool. Calm. Chapter 435 Palace Banquet 7. You're not stupid, just that you're straightforward with your words. Yang Wanning hesitated momentarily and added, "But you should be careful with your words in the future. If my father hears what one said today, he will definitely be angry. At that time, he might even find trouble with you or even your imperial residence. If he dares, I'll let imperial uncle deal with him. Besides, I'm telling the truth. Sometimes you can't always tell the truth. You should give King An a reminder later." Mingyu looked at her solemn expression and finally nodded. After that, the more they chatted, the more they bonded. They even laughed out loud from time to time. Sitting in the pavilion next door, the 8th princess gritted her teeth when she heard their laughter. Thinking of her mother's plan, she summoned her personal palace maid, Lian Qiao, and whispered some instructions. Lian Qiao nodded and left in a hurry. Not long after, a palace maid carried a pot of water into the pavilion where Yang Wanning and the others were. Taking advantage of the opportunity to refill the teapot, she deliberately tilted her foot so that the teapot spout was facing Yang Wanning, and the water spilled all over her. It was so hot that Yang Wanning stood in shock and pulled out her undergarments. Seeing this, Mingyu stepped forward and slapped the palace maid. "What are you doing?" After saying that, she checked on Yang Wanning and asked, "Wanning, are you all right?" "Fortunately, the water is not too hot. Otherwise, a layer of my skin would have peeled off." Yang Wanning shook her head. "Let's go. I'll bring you to change your clothes. Otherwise, your clothes won't dry in time." After Mingyu finished speaking, she brought her out of the pavilion. When the wind blew on the road, Yang Wanning's wet left leg felt a bone-piercing chill. At the same time, she was also thinking about the possibility of a conspiracy. She was afraid that this was another scheme devised by Madame Cui. If she went to change her clothes, would she be set up again? Thinking of this, the vigilance in her heart tightened, and she grabbed Mingyu tightly. As long as they were still together, no one would dare scheme against her. However, her guesses were soon verified. Princess Mingyu had just sent Yang Wanning to the lounge when a eunuch came to look for her. He said that the emperor was waiting anxiously for her. Only then did Mingyu realize she had something to discuss with the emperor. She could only arrange for a palace maid to send Yang Wanning some clothes and leave quickly. Seeing this, Yang Wanning had no choice but to be vigilant. On the other end, Zhou saw that Yang Wanning's clothes were wet. She informed Gu Qingrui and then went back to keep an eye on Yang Wanning. After Gu Qingrui received the news, he realized someone was plotting against Yang Wanning. Therefore, he went to the 3rd prince and said he wanted to send Yang Wanning some clothes. The 3rd prince nodded and sent Granny Lu to rush over with her clothes and palace maids. On the other end, after Yang Wanning entered the lounge, the palace maid quickly sent over a set of Mingyu clothes. However, she was knocked unconscious and brought to a room next door. Seeing this, Zhou simply used her spiritual senses to knock out the palace maid who had knocked out the one bringing clothes. Yang Wanning quickly changed her clothes. As soon as she removed her clothes, Zhou saw a eunuch blowing smoke into the room. Zhou used her spiritual senses to block the mouth of his pipe, and the eunuch immediately choked and fainted. Later, Granny Lu also arrived with her clothes. When she saw a fainted eunuch holding a blowpipe outside, she roughly understood what had happened. Follow current novels on Top Novel Fool. Calm. Chapter 436 Palace Banquet 8. Granny Lu immediately went forward to check on him. After confirming that he had really fainted, she asked 2 young palace maids to send the young eunuch to a room at the side. Only then did she walk to the door and knock on it. "Miss Yang Wanning, is that you? The 3rd prince sent me to deliver the clothes at the request of young master Gu Qingrui." Yang Wanning was surprised when she heard Gu Shengru's name. She quickly put on her half-undressed clothes and went forward to open the door. "Thank you, Granny." Can you pass me the clothes? Just as Granny Lu was about to pass the clothes to her, the two palace maids who had carried the young eunuch hurried over and whispered into Granny Liu's ear. Granny Liu's expression changed. She gave them a few more instructions and then told Yang Wanning, Miss Yang is too polite, but don't change in this room. Follow me. After saying that, she turned around and left with her clothes. Yang Wanning hesitated for a moment before following Granny Lu. Ultimately, she changed into the clothes that Gu Qingrui had prepared for her in a side room not far away. She wore an aqua blue dress with a deep blue interior and a light blue exterior. It made her look fair and young and accentuated her figure perfectly. The headdress on her head was not made of gold, silver, or jade but of simple jewelry made of blue crystal. Although wearing it didn't give her a magnificent look, it was still eye-catching. After Granny Lu finished dressing her up, she looked at her thoughtfully and said, Miss Yang, you have a good figure and looks. You will definitely stand out today. It's mainly because of Granny Liu's help. Thank you for today. If it weren't for you, Yang Wanning couldn't help but shed tears as she said this. She really did not expect Madame Cui and her schemes to be this vicious. If she succeeded today, Yang Wanning would definitely lose her reputation and die a horrible death. It seemed that Madame Cui was much more vicious than she had imagined. She had to be more careful in the future. You're lucky today. So, don't think about this anymore. Granny Lu was halfway through her sentence when a clamor came from not far away. Hurry up and pack up. Let's go watch the show. She coldly chuckled. After saying that, she immediately packed the clothes, the comb, and the rouge powder she had brought and then walked out excitedly. Yang Wanning was surprised when she saw this. She hadn't expected that Granny Lu would be this gossipy. As soon as they left the room, they saw a large group of people standing outside where they had stopped earlier. At the same time, there was also a furious roar from Madame Cui, Yang Wanning, oh, Yang Wanning, you've disgraced the Yang family. How could you do such a thing in the palace? How could you be bold enough to steal in the palace? Moreover, you're with the famous playboy, Chen Fang. Someone immediately echoed. Soldiers, capture all of them and throw them into the pond. At this moment, the Empress' angry voice sounded. What happened? Why is someone calling my name, and throwing who into the pond? Yang Wanning walked over and asked with a puzzled look. Everyone turned to look after hearing that. When they confirmed that she was the real Yang Wanning, they were all stunned. If Wan Ning was here, then the one in the room was. Seeing this, a tall and strong woman squeezed in and asked loudly, Mrs. Yang, are you sure it's Yang Wanning inside? Yang Wanning is here, you know. Yeah, hurry up and see who that woman is. Yang Wanning isn't the thief after all. Madame Cui, who was in the room, heard their words and froze. She quickly went forward and pulled the woman out. When she saw that it was an unfamiliar face, she froze. Chapter 437 Palace Banquet, 9. At this moment, the tall and strong woman said mockingly, One say, Madame Yang, did you plan this again? No matter what, Yang Wanning is still the daughter of the Yang family. If something happens to her, it won't look good on you either. After interacting with her for the past 2 years, I thought she was a good person. One sure didn't expect her to be this vicious. She was going to completely destroy Yang Wanning. Isn't this normal? As long as Yang Wanning is alive, her daughter will always be one rank lower. You people, hearing the crowd's words, Madame Cui gritted her teeth in anger, but she did not dare to offend them. After all, she was a person without an imperial mandate. Without the Empress' permission, she wouldn't even be able to enter the palace. Thinking of this, she could only turn to the Empress for help. The Empress glared at her and saw the round red dot on the captured woman's forehead. "How dare you, a palace maid, have an affair with another man in the palace? Someone beat her to death and throw her into a mass grave." As for Chen Fong, when the Empress said this, a woman suddenly rushed in from outside and kneeled. "Empress, one beg you to spare my son's life. I will definitely discipline him strictly in the future." At this point, she grabbed Chen Fong, who had just put on his clothes, and slapped him twice. "You unfilial son, it's fine if you usually flirt with the women outside. But do you think the palace is a place for you to mess around? You actually. It'll break your legs when we get back." Chen Fong dodged as he replied, Mother, listen to me. One was knocked unconscious and thrown here. One also." The Empress immediately stopped him. "That's enough. You can go back and settle your family's matters yourself." However, Chen Fong must leave the palace immediately. Unless he can enter the court as a scholar, he will not be allowed to enter the palace for life. "Thank you, Empress." Mrs. Chen brought Chen Fong to kowtow and immediately dragged him out of the palace. As for the palace maid, she was dragged out by the two other maids beside the Empress. Then, waves of screams could be heard, and soon there was silence. Meanwhile, the Empress rushed back to the Hall of Diligent Government with a dark expression. Seeing this, Madame Chui immediately jogged to catch up. Seeing this, the women more or less understood what had happened. However, they did not dare to talk about the Empress, so they gossiped about the Chui family. They felt that Madame Chui must have arranged for today's incident. The tall, strong woman looked at young Wanning and asked, "Wanning, did your stepmother arrange what happened today?" Young Wanning shook her head and said, "I'm not sure either. Previously, I was chatting with Princess Mingyu in the pavilion. Later, a palace maid accidentally splashed water all over me. Princess Mingyu brought me here to change my clothes, but someone by the emperor called her away. Granny Lu was asked by my cousin to bring me clothes, so we went to another room to change. As for what happened, I really don't know." "Your cousin gave you clothes? What do you mean?" "Oh, I know. The clothes the Yang family had previously prepared for her are not suitable, whether in color or style. I'm sure she had to ask her cousin for help." At this time, a 12 or 13-year-old girl smiled and spoke up. "Wait. Your cousin, which cousin could it be? He's my third cousin from the Gu family. He just entered the capital 2 days ago." "The Gu family, isn't the Gu family?" My cousin didn't elaborate on his reason for coming here, but he followed the third prince into the capital. "I see." After hearing this, the women rushed to the Hall of Diligent Government while discussing the Gu family, guessing what was happening with the Gu family re-entering the capital. Chapter 438 Palace Banquet 10. Young Wanning, who was lagging behind, looked at Granny Lu and asked, "Granny, do you recognize the tall and strong woman?" Young Wanning had lived 2 lives, and even if her status in both lives was not high, she had always lived in the capital. Why had she never seen this person in both of her lives? If I remember correctly, she's the direct daughter of Lord Yen, the commander of the 9 gates. She married a scholar of the highest degree and has been working with her husband outstation. It seems her husband is to be rewarded for his meritorious service in quelling a rebellion. Granny Lu replied. Young Wanning nodded to show she understood, but her thoughts were muddled. In her previous life, there were no sweet potatoes and no manifestations of Mother Goddess. Therefore, the great Ming dynasty fell into chaos at this time. It fell into turmoil for over 10 years before it calmed down. However, less than 10% of the population survived. Ultimately, although the first prince killed his father and brothers, he was eliminated by the biting second prince, who ascended the throne. Although the third prince was disabled and sat in a wheelchair, he was said to be the ruler in the shadows. Unfortunately, he had never married. Of course, the young family members were all executed, but Yang Wanyu survived by changing her looks and becoming a servant girl in Yang Wanning's manor. Furthermore, in order to live a better life, Yang Wanyu seduced Yang Wanning's husband, a scholar who was also a teacher, and murdered Yang Wanning before assuming her identity. Before she died, she also learned from Yang Wanyu that Yang Wanning's mother had been deliberately frozen to death, that she had been duped into marrying the scholar, and that her brother had been forced to become a hooligan who did all kinds of evil deeds. He died tragically in a gambling den. But everything changed after Yang Wanning regressed. Everything in her previous life could no longer be used as a reference. No, not entirely. The fight for the throne would not change, and what changed was only that the commoners had ended their troubled times ahead of schedule. When the Empress arrived at the side hall of the Hall of Diligent Government, she turned around and kicked Madame Cui. "What are you doing? I've already set up the stage for you, and you ruined it. Empress, please calm down. I was acting according to the plan." Who knows? Madame Cui paused for a moment and continued, "Could it be that the little bitch sensed something, so, when the Empress heard what she said, she remembered Yang Wanning's new clothes. The fabric and style were definitely not something that she could afford. After that, she quickly asked her personal palace maid to go outside and ask around. Because Yang Wanning had previously spilled the beans to the others, the palace maid quickly got wind of what happened and returned to the Empress. Gu Qingrui, the third son of the Gu family. The Empress muttered and fell silent. Since that was the case, she might as well push him to the opposite side. It would be easy to deal with all of them in one fell swoop. Since she's already acquainted with the third prince, why don't we let her marry him? The Empress suggested. But that would make things too easy for her, Madame Cui said in shock. The issue was that her daughter was only a secondary consort, and Yang Wanning was about to become a main consort. At that time, Yang Wanning would definitely suppress them. So, I guess it depends on your capabilities. The Empress turned her head and looked at her meaningfully. Madame Cui was stunned momentarily and did not understand what the Empress meant. When she saw this, a hint of disdain flashed across the Empress' eyes. She then turned around, sat to the side to drink tea, and ignored Madame Cui. The Emperor's representative had also arrived to remind the Empress Dowager that it was time. The Empress Dowager rose and stated, "We've had enough tea, and I'm sure you're all finished talking. Let's get there quickly so the Emperor doesn't have to wait any longer." After that, she waved at Zhou Ying and walked toward the Hall of Diligent Government with the help of her personal maid. The other women immediately stood up and followed after the Empress Dowager. Chapter 439 Palace Banquet 11. When they reached the outer perimeter of the Hall of Diligent Government, the Empress Dowager passed off Zhou Ying to King An's consort before separating. When Zhou Ying followed consort into the main entrance, she saw Zhou Huaiming and Gu Qingrui waiting at the door. When Zhou Huaiming and Gu Qingrui saw them, they quickly bowed to the old ladies. Seeing this, Consortin looked at Gu Qingrui and smiled. "I'll hand over your wife to you then. Come over to our residence whenever you're free." "Thank you. I'll pay you a visit for sure." Gu Qingrui nodded. He pulled Zhou Ying over to his side, and the three walked into the hall. The husband and wife followed Zhou Huaiming to sit at the Zhou family's table. Zhou Huaiming pushed some snacks from the table toward them and said, "Eat more. The food will get cold soon, so eat some to fill your stomach. Let's dig in." Gu Qingrui nodded and did not hesitate. He picked up a small piece of cornbread and began munching it down. As for Zhou Ying, she took a piece of chestnut cake. As soon as she bit down on the cake, she felt people looking over. She spread her spiritual senses while enjoying the snacks, listening and watching every move. Most of them were discussing the Yang family, especially the mother and daughter scheming against Yang Wanning, and how they threw their dignity away. Then there was the crowd's curiosity toward the Gu couple, but not regarding why they were there. Because the news of the sweet potato had already spread throughout the palace. Instead, these people were curious about their relationship with the Zhou family and the third prince. Especially at Principal Zhou's, sitting not far away, Zhou Ying and her husband should have been sitting at their side, but they didn't even say a word to them after they came in. Madame Zhou whispered to Principal Zhou. "Son, do you think we should try to repair our relationship with Zhou Ying? This could be considered paving the way for Jiaqing." Principal Zhou shook his head. "It's useless. If she still thinks she's a daughter of the Zhou family, she would have come to pay her respects long ago, but they didn't. It's obvious that they don't want to interact with us. That's not up to her. She's still part of the Zhou family. Don't do anything rash. You know better than one do what kind of life she had back home. If she makes a scene in public, we'll be in trouble. Besides, the consort selection is about to begin. Trying to repair our relationship now is useless, so let nature take its course." Although Madame Zhou was still unwilling, she remembered Zhou Ying's attitude toward her in Longevity Palace and ultimately did not say anything. However, after listening to the whole story, Zhou Jiaqing felt very uncomfortable. On the one hand, she balked even at asking for Zhou Ying's help. She felt it was embarrassing to beg Zhou Ying, whom she had once bullied. On the other hand, she hoped to get Zhou Ying's help. Because she knew very well that if she missed today's consort selection banquet, she would always be inferior to her eldest sister, who had already become the fourth prince's concubine. Thinking of this, she hesitated momentarily before walking over and sitting beside Zhou Ying. "Second sister, why didn't you come back home to take a look after returning to the capital?" Zhou Ying turned her head and looked at Zhou Jiaqing's fake smile and scheming eyes. She was so disgusted that she almost vomited. Zhou Jiaqing had come to beg for help but didn't even have a trace of sincerity. It was apparent she never cared for Zhou Ying, past or present. It just so happened that Zhou Ying did not want to interact with this family of hers. Thus, she sneered, "Oh, there's no way 1am Miss Zhou's sister. Didn't you say I could only serve you as a slave for the rest of my life?" "You..." Zhou Jiaqing looked at her undisguised mockery and was so angry that she raised her hand, about to hit her. "Do you dare to hit me?" Zhou Ying asked with a smile. Chapter 440 Palace Banquet 12. Zhou Jiaqing remembered where she was and clenched her fists tightly. Ultimately, she had no choice but to put her hands down. However, her eyes seemed to spew fire at her, as if they would burn her into ashes at any moment. Seeing this, Zhou Ying replied coldly, "Since you've never treated me as a member of the Zhou family, let's continue that. It's best if we don't interfere in each other's business in the future." She picked up her teacup and slowly drank it after saying that. "Humph, there will be a day when you cry about that." Zhou Jia gave a cold harumph. She turned around and returned to her seat with a livid face. "What's wrong? Why are you so angry?" Madame Zhou looked at Zhou Jiaqing, whose face was twisted with anger, and patted her back. "It's fine. She said that we should mind our own business in the future and not interact with each other anymore." Zhou Jiaqing spat with an angry expression. As for Zhou Ying's bullying of her, she did not mention a word about that. If her father had found out what she had done in the past, she would not hear the end of it. How preposterous. She has forgotten where she has come from. All right, one think this is good enough. Don't look for her anymore. Principal Zhou replied unhappily. At the same time, he felt uncomfortable, but he also knew this icy wall was not built in a day. Their relationship couldn't ease. Holding some prayer beads, Madame Zhou pushed the teacup in front of Zhou Jiaqing and said, "Listen to your father. Don't bother with her in the future. Let's just pretend that she doesn't exist in the Zhou family. Zhou Jiaqing heeded their advice, but the anger in her heart didn't subside and instead grew more intense. At this moment, Eunuch Li sang loudly, "The Emperor has arrived, the Empress Dowager has arrived, the Empress has arrived, the eldest prince has arrived." She had no choice but to suppress the anger in her heart, stand up, walk to the middle, and kneel with the others. Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress Dowager, the Empress, the first prince, for 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years. At this moment, the Emperor, who had walked to the side of the dragon throne, was about to sit down when he suddenly felt a tightness in his chest and fainted. Fortunately, Eunuch Li was quick enough to catch him but couldn't hold him with one hand. The two of them almost fell together. The eldest prince and the third prince rushed together and helped them up. They quickly helped the Emperor onto his throne. At the same time, the Empress Dowager and the others exclaimed, "Your Majesty." Eunuch Li, who had stabilized himself, hurriedly called for Principal Zhou. "Imperial Physician Zhou, hurry up and see what's happening with the Emperor." Principal Zhou immediately squeezed out of the crowd and jogged over, taking the Emperor's pulse. The Empress Dowager stared at Principal Zhou. Because she knew that although the court was calm, undercurrents surged below. If something happened to the Emperor, the Great Ming would be in chaos, and there would likely be another civil war. Nothing must happen to the Emperor. A moment later, Principal Zhou released his grip. It looks like he's in a state of anxiety, but it doesn't seem like it at the same time. Let's wait for the Emperor to wake up and ask him how he feels. After saying that, he took out a needle bag from his sleeve. The Empress understood and immediately asked the palace maid to light a lamp and hand it to him. After disinfecting the silver needles, Principal Zhou inserted one into the Emperor's body. Soon, the Emperor woke up. At first, he was at a loss, but after returning to his senses, he looked at Headmaster Zhou and asked, "Dr. Zhou, what happened?" "Judging by your pulse, it seems like you're suffering from an acute heart attack, but I need to ask you, are you still feeling unwell?" The Emperor calmed down, felt his personal state, and knew he had to say it was nothing, even if there was something. He shook his head and said, "Maybe I didn't sleep well yesterday, so I'm just a little dizzy. It's fine. You can go down." Chapter 441 Palace Banquet 13. He was panicking in his heart, however, because he felt as if someone was pinching his heart with their hands and he could die at any time. Even now, he still felt a tightness in his chest, but he still forced himself to sit up straight and wave his hand. "Rise." "Thank you, Emperor." After everyone returned the greeting, they sat back down one after another. At this moment, the Emperor felt like the clouds had cleared and the sun had appeared. He relaxed a great deal. The Empress Dowager and the others saw that his expression had finally smoothed out and heaved a sigh of relief. They each sat back in their seats. "I believe that all my beloved ministers know the purpose of holding this banquet today, so we'll get straight to the point." After he finished speaking, he looked at Eunuch Li. Eunuch Li understood his intention, so he had a young eunuch take out an imperial edict. By the will of the heavens, the Emperor has decreed that King Xian has made outstanding contributions by quickly promoting winter wheat planting. Special reward, 1,000 taels of gold, cloth. His son, the son of King Xian, Yang Zhang, will be transferred from the Imperial Academy to the Ministry of Revenue and serve as a 5th-grade counselor. Thank you, Emperor. Long live my Emperor. The father and son were delighted. They immediately went forward to bow and take the imperial edict from Eunuch Li's hands. Next was the third prince. Because of his contribution to promoting white sweet potatoes and quelling the rebellion, he was conferred the title of King Rui and given 10,000 acres of land. The first prince and the fourth prince were bestowed with the titles of King Hui and King Kong, respectively, also because of their contributions to quelling the rebellion. There were also more miscellaneous meritorious awards given to various officials. Uniquely took out the last imperial edict and read, "The emperor has decreed that the design of the water wheel and the planting technique of the sweet potato are from Gu Qingrui and his wife. He also led his clansmen and the Qian clan to invent the first water wheel and promote white sweet potatoes to the masses. The Gu family is hereby pardoned. Gu Qingrui will be adopted under Princess Ping Yang's name and become the legitimate eldest son of the Gu family. He will regain his scholar status and be given a residence, 1,000 acres of land, a shop, and 100 pieces of cloth. Student Gu Qingrui, Commoner Zhou, thanks the emperor for his reward. Long live my emperor, long live my emperor." The husband and wife stepped forward and bowed. Pft! The emperor spat out a mouthful of blood, startling everyone. Eunuch Li quickly supported him and said, "Emperor." The Empress Dowager, Empress, and other members of the royal family immediately surrounded him. The emperor waved his hand and covered his chest. "It's fine. I've spat out a mouthful of blood, but the tightness in my chest is gone now." After that, he held on to his chest and said to Gu Qingrui and Zhou, "Both of you may rise." At this moment, Principal Zhou rushed over and retook the emperor's pulse. "Thank you, Emperor." The husband and wife stood up and returned to their seats with the imperial edict. Although the officials did not say anything, they were muttering inwardly. They were all worried that something was wrong with the emperor's body, especially the fourth prince's faction. Their political power was far inferior to the first prince's, so they would die miserably if the emperor passed now. At the same time, Zhou was also mumbling inwardly. Every time something happened to the emperor, she could feel an invisible thing bouncing out of her body to attack him. The first time might have been a coincidence, but she had to take it seriously after the second time. But why? After thinking about it, she came to a conclusion. Although she had not yet recovered her identity as Mother Goddess, the emperor was a believer in Mother Goddess no matter the circumstances. He couldn't accept her showing respect by kneeling. As for why the Empress Dowager and the third prince were fine, it was probably because she only bowed and did not kneel. Chapter 442 Palace Banquet, 14. Thinking of this, Zhou was both excited and nervous. She was excited because she had finally found a way to punish people. However, this would damage the dignity of Mother Goddess and hers, so she would not use it unless it were a matter of life and death. She was worried that the emperor would find out about it. If he really made things difficult for her, it wouldn't be a problem for Gu Qingrui and her to go into hiding. But the people around her. It seemed that he would try his best not to kowtow to the emperor in the future. Gu Qingrui was also feeling uneasy. He could not understand why the emperor would put him under Princess Ping Yang's name. To be honest, he did not want anything to do with this. This was because his new identity would not only not help him but also restrict him in every aspect. He might even get entangled in the drama of fighting for the throne if things went wrong. It seemed that they had to return to Dongyang as soon as possible. The third prince looked at the pale-faced emperor and felt complicated. He could guess that the emperor wanted to divide him and Gu Qingrui. Or rather, the emperor wanted to turn Gu Qingrui into his aide and hold him firmly in his hands. This was also a move against his fourth brother, because everyone knew Princess Ping Yang had always supported the fourth prince. It was also likely to be a move to lure the first prince into killing Gu Qingrui. Ultimately, this was a superb move on the chessboard. The emperor moved only a little pawn to rail up the three princes. At the same time, although the empress, the first prince, and the fourth prince did not overthink it, they also had their thoughts about the situation. The faces of the Yang family members turned hideous, especially Madame Cui and her daughter. They bullied Yang Wanning because she did not have a backer. The Gu family's comeback had undoubtedly dealt them a heavy blow. The only one happy about this turn of events was Yang Wanning. As long as the Gu family was no longer guilty of their crimes, her chances of winning tonight's selection banquet would be much higher. She looked at the third prince because he was her target, the future emperor. As for the other stuff, she had not thought of it yet, nor was she in the mood to think about it. A moment later, Principal Zhou retracted his hand. The emperor is not seriously ill. He is just stressed out, so he should rest more. But why did he vomit blood? The Empress Dowager asked in confusion. That's a blood clot. Spitting them out is actually better for him. Great to hear that. The Empress Dowager heaved a sigh of relief and said to the Emperor, why don't we postpone the event? It's better if you go back and rest. We'll be here for the rest of the banquet. No need. My body is fine. Let's continue. The Emperor shook his head. All right then, but if you feel unwell again, you'd better listen to your mother. The Emperor nodded and asked Eunuch Li to arrange for the program's continuation. Eunuch Li hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. He let the dancers that he had prepared go on stage. After the two dances, the people's minds also calmed down. The Empress Dowager and the others saw that the Emperor had recovered his usual spirit and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Shinran, the Empress called out. I heard that you recently learned a new song. Play it for your father. Let's see if you've improved. Yes, mother. The 8th princess nodded and walked to the center with her pipa. She bowed to the Emperor and said, please give me your opinion after this, Imperial Father. After saying that, she sat on a stool the palace maid had brought and readied herself. She started by mimicking a bird's cry, which was great when played with a pipa. The following performance was like a gathering of birds. The tone was bright and cheerful, giving off a happy feeling to the audience. Chapter 443 Palace Banquet, 15. After the song ended, the Emperor laughed and said, not bad. You sure have improved quite a bit recently. Shinran, you have to work harder in the future and strive to play a famous piece as soon as possible. Thank you, Imperial Father. One will definitely work hard and let you hear a famous song I can play as soon as possible, the 8th princess replied. All right. Father will be waiting. The Emperor nodded. The 8th princess left obediently after that. The Empress then called out the names of a few young ladies. They were all excellent in their crafts, be it singing, dancing, or painting. Soon, it was the Yang family's turn. It was unknown if the Empress deliberately stifled Yang Wanning, but she called Yang Wanyu up first. After Yang Wanyu went up, she performed an intricate dance. Unfortunately, the dance did not go well because of the difficulty, and her body was not flexible enough. Perhaps she had also noticed this, so she sulked when she went down. Next was Yang Wanning. She did not expect the Empress to give her a chance to show off her chess skills, which she was best at. Yang Wanning hesitated momentarily but still went up to play against Grand Scholar's son, who was excellent at chess. Initially, the Grand Scholar was at a disadvantage, but he quickly tied the score and won against Yang Wanning in the end. Finally, he commented, Miss Yang's chess skills are pretty good. Your layout is exquisite, and I'm sure not many people here are your opponents. However, what you lack is endurance and a calm heart. Only when your heart is completely calm can you judge what to do next. I've learned my lesson. Thank you for your advice, Lord Sunday. Yang Wanning bowed. At the same time, she started to self-reflect, as it was said that chess was like life. She was not calm, and it seemed that she had to practice more and pay more attention in the future. Let's play again if there's a chance. The Grand Scholar's son returned the bow, turned around, and left. Next was Zhou Jiaqing, and her performance was calligraphy. Although it lacked the strength and charm, her handwriting was still quite pretty. After being flattered by everyone, Zhou Jiaqing looked at Zhou Ying with a proud expression and said, "Zhou Ying, you haven't shown your face in front of everyone yet. Why don't you take this opportunity to show everyone your talent?" "Your Majesty, May 1st, she asked the Empress. Principal Zhou and Madame Zhou's expressions turned ugly. This was because Zhou Ying wasn't giving the Zhou family the time of day. If she exposed the truth, the Zhou family would lose all their face. The Empress Dowager and Consort An's expressions also turned. They knew Zhou Ying had grown up in the kitchen. She could not even read, let alone have the talent to perform. Wasn't this just purely embarrassing for her? Madame Cui and her daughter were also delighted. If Zhou Ying embarrassed herself here, she would have to lower her head before them in the future. Yang Wanyu gloated, while Yang Wanning was full of worry. The third prince and Zhou Huaiming were filled with curiosity because the Zhou Ying they had come into contact with was very different from the one in the rumors, so they hoped Zhou Ying would be able to create a miracle. Let's see Lady Gus' intention. The Empress hesitated for a moment before replying. She could not figure out why the Emperor would suddenly put Gu Qingrui under the name of Ping Yang. Hence, it was best not to offend him. "How about it, Zhou Ying? Do you want to try?" Zhou Jiaqing tried to force Zhou Ying again. "Qinger, don't be so rude. Quickly, come back here." Principal Zhou put down his cup and scolded sternly. Zhou Jiaqing didn't retreat after hearing that. Instead, she looked at Zhou Ying provocatively. A person who would move her feet instead of her mouth whenever possible really suited her taste. It seemed that she had finally found a soulmate. The Empress looked at Zhou Ying with curiosity and suspicion. If she was correct, Zhou Ying must know martial arts. Otherwise, that kick would not have been so fast and ruthless. Is there anyone else who wants to show off their talents? As soon as she finished speaking, a few younger ones came up one after another, most of them just dancing. However, no one was in the mood to watch, so it ended quickly. After a while, the banquet officially began. As Zhou Huaiming said, all the dishes were already cold when they were served. The key was that the dishes were exquisite, although the portions were too small. There was a braised carp, stir-fried meat, beef slices with soy sauce, stir-fried cabbage, a plate of sesame seed cakes, rice, and egg soup. After the Emperor and Empress had started the banquet, they took a cup of wine and left. Everyone exchanged a few pleasantries and hurriedly ate a few mouthfuls before dispersing. Following that, the couple followed the third prince back to the manor. Chapter 446 Various Families' Reaction 2. After she went back, she washed up and lay on the bed. Zhou Ying said dejectedly, "I thought I could taste a real royal chef's cooking at the banquet and learn from it. One didn't expect the banquet to be so shabby. It's already difficult to gather so many ingredients in such a year." Gu Qingrui shook his head. Deming appeared to have calmed down at the time, but the masses were still relying on the rice and flour they distributed. There was still a scarcity of meat. "That's true, but to be honest, that stir-fried meat is sure great. Yours doesn't lose out either. It's different. To put it bluntly, one still rely on various seasonings to cook." However, the chef relied on his skills. "So, you learned something from it?" "Yeah, I'll try again later. I don't believe I can't cook as well as him. I'll do as long as it's 90% similar." "I support you." Gu Qingrui quickly nodded. However, he internally dreads the days of tasting dishes, as it would be painful. It seemed that he had to drag brother Zhou along. Didn't he like to eat Zhou Ying's food? Let him come over and eat as much as he wants. Oh, right, why do you think the Emperor put you under Princess Ping Yang's name? Is there some conspiracy? It's hard to say. The Emperor's mind is not simple, but we must be more careful in the future. Oh, right, and that sister of yours. After suffering such a huge loss today, I'm afraid she won't let you off easily. Zhou Jiaqing is easy to deal with. Although she is ruthless, she doesn't scheme. The troublesome one is her sister, Zhou Jiaying, who is also the concubine of the fourth prince. She'll be a difficult woman to deal with. However, one heard that she's about to give birth, so I'm sure she won't have time to care about these dramas for now. If the eldest son is born from a concubine, the fourth prince will be in for a lot of fun. Gu Qingrui paused for a moment and gloatingly mocked. It has nothing to do with us. But no matter what, let's not have anything to do with the fourth prince. There's no doubt about it. He didn't help us when the Gu family was raided or even when the first prince suppressed us with the water wheel incident. I won't forget about that. Zhou Ying nodded and told him how young Wanning was almost tricked today. I suspect that the Empress is involved in this. We have to tread carefully. That's right. Back then, the first prince's party reported and raided the Gu family's home. There is no way the Empress would let Yang Wanning rise. I'm sure the Yang family will have a good show tonight. Pay attention to it later and see if Yang Wanning is worth helping. Alright. On the other hand, Zhou Huaiming didn't return to the Zhou clan immediately after returning to his residence. Instead, he followed the third prince to his study. After he sat down, Zhou Huaiming stepped forward and bowed solemnly. I, Zhou Huaiming, pay my respects to King Rui. Long live, Your Highness. The third prince glanced at him and said, That's enough. It's just a title. Is there a need for that? Why not? Zhou Huaiming sat down. A prince is just an identity, indicating that you are the emperor's son. A king's title is one of nobility and holds real commanding power. He asked in confusion, but why did the emperor confer all three of you as kings today? Did he deprive all of you of the possibility of inheriting the throne? Could it be that he has his eyes on the seventh or the ninth prince inheriting? It's hard to say. Maybe he wants to sit on the throne for a few more years. After all, based on the first prince's current momentum, he will force the abdication in another 2 or 3 years even if the emperor doesn't step down. Serves him right. He was the one who single-handedly supported the Marquis of Dingan, the Sun family. Chapter 447 Various Families' Reaction, 2. It's just political trickery. Otherwise, why do you think he suddenly put Gu Qingrui under Princess Ping Yang's name? Princess Ping Yang didn't even enter the Gu family's ancestral grave. Actually, she's no longer considered a wife of the Gu family. Zhou Huaiming heard him mention this and immediately understood the crux of the matter. His heart sank as he said, he wants to place Brother Gu in the limelight. Exactly. Speaking of which, it's also my fault. Previously, he had no intention of rewarding them, and I was the one who recommended them. One didn't expect such an outcome. You can't say that. They've contributed a lot to promoting the concept of eating potatoes instead of rice. Since that's the case, let's give her a push. Even if being Princess Ping Yang's son doesn't have a title, he should at least have an official position. Let's wait a little longer, and we'll ask the couple's opinion on this later. Don't make things worse. That's true. Zhou Huaiming nodded. He remembered another purpose for tonight and asked curiously, by the way, there are many girls at the banquet tonight. If there's any you fancy, you have to act in advance. Otherwise, the Empress will probably not arrange for a girl with powerful in-laws for you. Not everyone is like Grandpa, wholeheartedly acting for our country. So it doesn't matter who you choose. As long as she comes from a clear background and isn't a spy, it's fine. Zhou Huaiming nodded and didn't say anything else. Instead, he asked, "You should have a goal so we can vet her in advance." After hearing this, King Rui hesitated for a moment. "Let's do so then. One, have an eye on the granddaughter of the Grand Scholar's son, Sun Miaoke, as well as Hong Suji from the Hong family of the Minister of Human Resources. These two are decent, especially Sun Miaoke. She has the reputation of being the capital's most talented woman. Moreover, Grand Scholar's son is noble, so he won't arouse the emperor's suspicion. Don't just talk about me, you're half a year older than me. Do you have anyone you like? If you do, you must hurry up and take care of it. Otherwise, it'll be too late once your sweetheart marries someone else." Zhou Huaiming was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. "I'm not in a hurry, especially when I'm not at home often. Let's wait and see." When King Rui heard this, he knew that Zhou Huaiming was thinking of the deaths of his grandmother, aunt, and cousin-in-law. He stood up and patted his shoulder. "I guarantee no one will dare touch the Zhou family within 5 years. 5 years later, no one can touch the Zhou family." Zhou Huaiming paused for a moment before he understood what he meant. He smiled and said, "Then I'll look for it." "Yes, you're not young anymore. Settle down early and give birth to a son and a daughter, and Grandpa will be at ease." Zhou Ying entered her inner space and first went to the Zhou family through the Mother Goddess Temple. Madame Zhou's Pine Crane Hall was now filled with people. Zhou Jiaqing kneeled on the ground and wiped her tears, looking wronged. However, no one in the room really cared about her. Especially her 2 stepsisters, 3 cousins, and their mother. Their gazes were even more unfriendly, and there was even some hatred. Her actions today would hinder not only her own marriage but also those of her 5 younger sisters, who would also be implicated. Of course, some people were also gloating, with Zhou Ying feeling the same way. After a moment of silence, second Aunt Zhou said, "Mother, based on the situation, it's better to send Jiaqing to the manor to stay for some time. It won't be too late to bring her back after the rumors pass." "That's right, Mother. She won't be able to participate in the consort selection this time. Why doesn't she leave and hide from the trouble?" Second Uncle Zhou echoed. You, that's just cruel." Zhou Jiaqing heard them and cried even louder. Chapter 449 Various Families' Reaction 4. After hesitating momentarily, Zhou Ying decided to return and think of a foolproof plan with Gu Qingrui. She threw this to the back of her mind and went to the Yang family. At this time, the lights in the Yang family were out. Madame Cui tossed and turned in the main house of the central courtyard, unable to sleep because of what had happened today. Yang Shiqing was also a little annoyed by her. He sat up and said, "You can flip in this bed as much as you like. I'm going to the study to sleep." After saying that, he began to put on his clothes. "Wait. Since you're not asleep, let's talk." Madame Cui quickly grabbed his wrist. "Hurry up and say it. We still have morning court tomorrow." Yang Shiqing yawned. Madame Cui had no choice but to tell him how they plotted against Yang Wanning and how the Empress reprimanded them. Finally, she asked, "What did the Empress mean by that? What does she mean by it depends on my ability?" Yang Shiqing looked at her with disgust. If she hadn't helped him with many private things over the years, to be honest, he wouldn't have promoted her as his wife for fear that she would fall out with him. What a dense woman. He replied with disdain, "Even if the emperor bestows the marriage, a marriage will not be successful if something happens to the bride. It will, in turn, delay the third prince's marriage. No, it's King Rui now. The Empress wants me to continue to think of ways to eliminate Yang Wanning. Madame Chwake shook her head and continued, but after a bestowment, she would be considered half a member of the royal family. How could I escape unscathed once the third prince investigated when something happened to her? Young Shirching looked at her in surprise, as he didn't expect her to think of this. It seemed that she understood the Empress' intention, but she didn't dare to think about it, or rather, she didn't dare to do it. That was what kept her up at night. There's a phrase called accident and an idiom called killing someone with a borrowed knife. After saying that, he put on his clothes and walked out. When Madame Chway returned to her senses, he was already gone. After that, she crawled under the blanket and couldn't help but shiver. Young Wanning was his biological daughter, yet he could give her ideas without blinking about dealing with his daughter. Was it just because of the Gu family? It seemed that she had to be more careful. Otherwise, she might be abandoned at any time. As for young Wanning, she would wait and judge the situation. Regardless, she did not plan to do anything more herself. Zhou Ying heard young Shiching's words and felt the coldness in his heart. He probably only had himself and no one else inside him. Thinking of this, Zhou Ying turned to look at the Empress. At that moment, the Empress discussed the ladies who had appeared earlier at the banquet with the Emperor. At the same time, the Emperor was flipping through a booklet in his hand. Zhou Ying went over to take a look. It clearly recorded each girl's preferences, personality, strengths, weaknesses, abilities, etc. It even recorded their shady doings. The records were very detailed. Zhou Ying was curious as it would take an abnormal person to record all of this. However, she soon discovered some things that could be improved. For example, Zhou Jiaqing's brutal side, which no one knew, was not recorded down. It seemed that this was not as detailed as she thought. The Empress said, "I've chosen 2 consorts for the third prince. One is the Empress Dowager's niece, the daughter of the current Minister of Rights, Qin Wei. She's the only girl in the Qin family and is said to be doted on by thousands. There's the daughter of the Minister of Revenue, Yang Wanning, born of the Gu family." "Oh, then tell me, why did you choose Yang Wanning?" "As far as one know, Yang Shiqing is very close to you. Moreover, you intend to make Yang Wanyu the eldest prince's second consort." The Emperor raised his head and stared at her. Chapter 450 Various Families' Reaction 5. Yang Wanyu was currently the Yang family's favorite, while Yang Wanning, the eldest daughter, was effectively abandoned. Pushing Yang Wanning to the third prince was equivalent to cutting off his support from the in-laws. It could also drive a wedge between the emperor and the third prince. As for the Empress Dowager's niece, the emperor would not marry her to any of the princes, especially the third prince. Otherwise, the Empress Dowager might not always be on his side. A man should marry a wise wife. When Mrs. Gu was not feeling well 2 years ago, Yang Wanning helped her mother manage her dowry. It is said that she managed it well. I see, it was easy for Madame Chway to seize power right after that. The Empress knew this was because Yang Shiqing took advantage of Mrs. Gus's death and the snowstorm's impact to seize the dowry forcefully, but she could not say this clearly. Seeing this, the Emperor couldn't be bothered to listen to her explanation anymore and asked, "What about the fourth prince?" "The daughter of the Minister of Personnel, Hong Suji." "That is fine." The Emperor hesitated for a moment before nodding. Lord Hong was his trusted aide. With Hong Suji and Principal Zhou, the fourth prince would be closely watched. "What about the seventh prince?" he asked. "The daughter of the Grand Scholar's son, Sun Miaoke." "How about her?" "The seventh prince and the Grand Scholar's son have a teacher-student relationship. They will be satisfied with this arrangement." The Emperor flipped through Sun Miaoke's information and found that she was a woman with many talents. Her best points were that she was strong and decisive, dealing with problems swiftly and decisively. He shook his head. Sun Miao can be assigned to the third prince. He's not home all year round, so he needs a capable wife. He paused momentarily and continued, young Wanning will be his concubine as well. As for the seventh prince, his mother doesn't have anyone in the imperial court, so let's choose Yan Yurong to be his wife, the direct granddaughter of the Nine Gates Admiral Yan. The Empress' heart skipped a beat when she heard this. The Nine Gates Admiral was in charge of the entire capital's military forces. It could be said that he was even more of a threat than the Zhou family. This was also why she had never nominated anyone from this family, nor did she dare name someone to the first prince. What did the emperor mean by this? Was he starting to support the seventh prince? It's settled then. Inform the Ministry of Rites to start preparing wedding attire for them. The imperial edict will be issued tomorrow for them to get married one after another. After the emperor finished speaking, he returned to his study to draft an imperial edict for bestowing marriages. Chapter 451 Various Families Reaction 6. You will know when you see the reactions of the princes after the imperial edict is issued tomorrow. In short, the first prince and the Yang family will definitely not watch the Gu family rise again. They will even use us to attack the third prince. As for the fourth prince, I'm not sure at the moment. They might try to rope him in, or they might directly become enemies. The son of Princess Ping Yang, the concubine of the third prince. Zhou Ying could not help but mutter after hearing that. Could it be that the emperor wanted to place them on a pedestal and drop them to their deaths? She knew she had to pay more attention to the reactions of all parties from now on. If necessary, she did not mind striking first. Thinking of this, she immediately remembered Zhou Jiaqing's plan. Zhou Ying quickly told Gu Qingrui and asked, by the way, do you think there's a way to successfully bring my original self's adoptive mother and her family out successfully? Otherwise, Zhou Jiaqing would definitely vent her anger on them after getting snubbed by me. With your relationship, there is only one way, and that is to threaten them. Otherwise, the Zhou family will definitely not let them go. Moreover, we have to be confident in our threats. Otherwise, we might be countered. Threatening them. Zhou Ying carefully reviewed her original self's memories. Besides Zhou Jiaqing's facade, she knew nothing else could be levied. However, Zhou Jiaqing's status in the family was not very high. This was probably not enough to threaten Madame Zhou. Gu Qingrui saw her frown and knew she had nothing to work on. Afterwards, he got up and went to his laboratory to work on something. When he came out, he handed her a paper bag and said, if you can't think of a solution for now, apply this medicine to Zhou Jiaqing's skin. This would cause a person to develop a slight rash all over their body. It will look like a typical rash and recover in 7 or 8 days without any antidote. I'm sure she won't be able to care about your adoptive mother's family for some time after that. We can use these few days to think of something. Although it was a little underhand, it's perfect for dealing with Zhou Jiaqing. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she turned around and applied the medicine to Zhou Jiaqing's face and hands through the Mother Goddess Temple. After confirming that the medicine was all absorbed by Zhou Jiaqing, only Zhou Ying put away the remaining medicine powder. Just as she was about to leave the Zhou family, she suddenly saw the eldest son of the Zhou family, Zhou Likuan, sneaking out of the door and entering a brothel. He called out to a girl named Qing'er, and after entering the house, he immediately hugged her and started kissing her. Qing'er pushed him away.